We're going to be answering a question, what programming language should you learn first when starting out? Let's get into it. Hey, this is Andrew from Engineer the Interview, and you're probably watching this because you finally decided that you want to learn how to code and eventually land that software engineering job or work on that personal project. You come to the right place, and I'm going to get right to the point and say that I believe that JavaScript would be my top pick when choosing a programming language to learn. Before I go into the reasons on why I chose JavaScript, I think it's really important to understand how these languages are different from one another before deciding which one to learn first. And be sure to stick around to the end where I share my runner-up picks. You can categorize programming languages into two types, static typed and dynamic typed. And I know what you're thinking, what is this nonsense, what does it mean? I'll explain it for you. Static type languages just require you to explicitly state the type when defining a variable or function. On the other hand, with dynamic type languages, they don't require this strict rule because it's an interpreter that's analyzing your code and assuming the type for you. You can think of dynamic type languages to be like automatic cars. You only have to worry about the gas pedal in order to go forward. On the other hand, static type languages are more like manual cars. There's added complexities like the stick shifts or being in the right gear in order to go forward as well. Dynamic type languages typically have less to worry about, so they're often seen to be more beginner friendly of the two. Of course, there's trade-offs, like dynamic type languages are more prone to errors, but that's going outside the scope of this video. JavaScript and Python are considered dynamic typed, whereas Java and C++ are considered static typed. Now that you know the differences, let's go into the reasons. 1. Beginner friendly. JavaScript is considered to be very beginner friendly. Unless you like playing life on hard mode, you're going to have a much easier time learning something with less complexities. Going back to that analogy example, if I were to try to learn how to use a manual car, in addition to learning how to drive, I'd probably end up walking home. Here's an example of JavaScript and Java doing the exact same thing. It doesn't look like much now, but it can get a lot more complicated once you get into interfaces and classes. I think it's really important to set yourself up for success, and my type of learning style is to ease into something new rather than jump into the complex details. 2. Versatility. JavaScript is the only language that can be used in both the front end and the back end. The front end is what you're experiencing visually right now with how the title and video player is aligned and stylized, whereas the back end is sending the actual data to your web browser. Rather than learning a language that's specific to one field and limiting the number of jobs you can apply to, why not learn JavaScript where you can potentially double the number of opportunities since it can do both? It's worth noting that JavaScript jobs tend to be front-end related, but my first company and many others use Node.js for their back-end services, which uses JavaScript. If you were interested in building out full-stack applications, which requires a front-end and a back-end, then you can accomplish all of that with just learning JavaScript. But if you were to go with domain-specific languages, you would have to learn two separate languages just to accomplish the same thing. 3. Market dominance. Choosing a language that's widely used by most companies is critical, because more companies that use it equals more opportunities. I feel like it wouldn't be a good use of my time and effort if I were to learn an obscure language with only 3 open roles, whereas a more utilized language would have thousands of opportunities. According to a Stack Overflow survey, they show that JavaScript leads in the most used language by all developers. And looking at the tech stack of the most popular websites, we can see that JavaScript is exclusively used for the front end, and some companies even use it for their back-end services. And there you have it. These are the top 3 reasons why I recommend JavaScript as the programming language you should learn when starting out. Now, of course, there are languages that are more preferred in certain areas. Like for data and analytics, they usually work with Python and R. But if you're just trying to break into tech and land your first software engineering job, then I would recommend focusing on the language that would give you the most opportunities. If I were to pick my top runner-ups, I would choose Python because it's beginner friendly and Java because it's also in high demand. And just because you pick one language first, doesn't mean you have to stick with it the rest of your career. I picked up JavaScript initially, but at my current job, I work with Java almost every day. Although programming languages are syntactically different from one another, they all follow a similar fundamental concept, so you can use the first language that you've learned as a building block and apply that to future languages. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, I appreciate a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.